Hey, thanks for joining me on my website. I'm Christopher Sasha. I'm a functional health strategist with almost 20 years of hands-on experience in the fitness industry. And in this short video, I want to explain why eating 3 meals a day with a snack in between each meal may be leading to weight gain and obesity-related diseases. Now, there's been a huge increase in overweight people developing diseases like type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome mostly because they're eating way too many carbohydrates and way too often for their particular lifestyles. Now, conventional health advice to stabilize blood sugar levels, which means to keep our energy levels stable, is to eat every 3 hours, basically. So you'll be eating 3 meals and snacking between each meal, which equates to eating 5 or 6 times per day. And the reason behind this, the theory behind this, is that when you eat this way, you continually give your body the raw materials it needs to create energy, to run from one meeting to the other, to get your kids to soccer practice after work and get dinner on the table before the day is over. Your body needs energy for all this. However, if you're not a type 1 diabetic, 95% of us don't need to be eating this way. Even our doctors suggest that we eat this way. But did you know that your doctor didn't go to school to learn about nutrition or lifestyle? There's only 2 reasons why doctors go to school. It's either to learn how to perform surgery or to dispense drugs. They only take 1 nutritional class to get their doctorate degree, yet we're putting our trust into these doctors that most of them don't know very much about nutrition. So when you eat every 3 hours, you give your body these macronutrients, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates that our bodies convert into a usable energy. But they can't use fats, proteins, and carbohydrates the way that we eat these foods. So it converts these foods into usable energy. It converts carbohydrates into glucose, and another word for glucose is sugar. It converts protein into amino acids, and it converts fats into triglycerides and glycerol. But let's focus on the glucose, because I believe this is where the major problem is coming from with our diets today in the Western civilization, America. So our bodies have an automatic blood sugar regulator mechanism, and it's controlled by 2 hormones. Most of us have heard of insulin, and insulin's counterpart is called glucagon. And these 2 are produced in the pancreas, and they work in like a seesaw fashion. So when insulin is up, glucagon is down. And when insulin goes down, glucagon goes up. And this is how it balances our blood sugar levels or our energy levels. So this is how the insulin-glucagon system works. In a healthy person where their metabolism is working efficiently and insulin and glucagon are working properly. So when this person eats, what happens is they eat the food, it goes into the body processes it. The carbohydrates from this meal get converted into glucose. Glucose goes into the bloodstream, which is why it's called blood sugar. Okay, when that happens, it triggers the body to produce insulin. And insulin's job is to take these compounds, glucose, and put it into the 75 trillion cells to make our bodies, glycogen tanks, and fat cells. And this is how it works. So when you eat, the glucose goes into the blood sugar, insulin takes it, and the first place that it takes the energy is into the 75 trillion cells that make up our bodies. And when these 75 trillion cells are full, then the remaining calories from the foods that you just ate go into, some of them get converted into a compound called glycogen, which is just a scientific fancy word for stored carbohydrates. And where these go, glycogen goes into muscle and liver tissues. So it's called liver glycogen and muscle glycogen. And when these tanks are full, then the remaining calories from the foods that you just ate go into the fat cells. The fat cells enlarge a little bit, and it produces another hormone called leptin. Leptin communicates with your brain and says, hey, stop eating, you're full, and you stop eating. So that's how your body takes the raw materials, so the foods that you eat, converts it into usable energy, and puts it into all of these tissues for energy or future energy. Okay. Now, after the time you get done eating, it takes about 3.5 hours for insulin to do all this. So then as insulin goes down, then it triggers the body to produce glucagon. So after you get done eating the meal, about 3.5 hours later, insulin is back down to baseline. That's when you start burning fat. Glucagon kicks in, and as the 75 trillion cells deplete from energy, your body's like, well, we need more energy. So where does it go? It goes into the glycogen tanks, and it converts the glycogen back into glucose, goes into the bloodstream, insulin puts it back into the 75 trillion cells that make up our bodies. Now, as the 75 trillion cells deplete and glycogen tanks deplete, then your body is like, well, we need more energy, so where are we going to get it from? That's when it goes into the fat cells, and it converts the fat into a compound called fatty acids, and it brings it into our 75 trillion cells that make up our bodies, and that's how our bodies are able to regulate blood sugar levels and regulate and keep our energy levels stable. However, insulin is a fat storing hormone and glucagon is a fat burning hormone. Now, I told you it takes about 3.5 hours for insulin to do its job, get out of the blood system, and go back down to baseline. So if you're eating every 3 hours, you're not giving your body enough time for insulin to do its job, get back down to baseline so you can start burning fat. Plus, you're probably not getting into your glycogen tanks. Let's face it, most of us have a sedentary lifestyle, so we're not using a hell of a lot of calories. So as these cells are depleting, you might not be depleting all of your 75 trillion cells that have immediate energy, so you might not even be getting into your glycogen tanks. If you're not getting into your glycogen tanks, where's the food go into? They only have 3 different places for the calories from the foods that you eat go into: 75 trillion cells, glycogen tanks, and the fat cells. So if you're eating every 3 hours and you're not getting into the glycogen, you're not touching glycogen to be converted into energy, these tanks are still full. So the food goes into the 75 trillion cells. It can't get into the glycogen tanks because they're already full. So the only place that it can go is into the fat cells. And that's why we continue to get fatter and fatter and sicker, because when you get fatter and fatter, your belly expands. It's called visceral fat, and that's where all the diseases come from. That's where heart disease comes from, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer. All these diseases come from having too much visceral fat. So we need to get that down. So instead of eating every 3 hours, which is making you fatter and fatter and sicker, because you're not giving your body enough time to get into the fat cells to be used as energy, I propose to eat every 5 to 6 hours. That way, it takes about 3.5 hours for insulin to go back down to baseline, and you have 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours, between 5 and 6 hours, 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours for your body to use fat for energy. And that's what it's supposed to be doing to keep you losing weight, reset your metabolism so it works more efficiently, and reduce your risk to these chronic diseases that I mentioned earlier with the cardiovascular disease, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer. So it reduces the weight and it reduces your risk to many of these chronic diseases. Okay. So eating every 5 to 6 hours, it gives you enough time for your glycogen tanks to be used and depleted to get into fat cells to be used as energy. Now, when you first going from however you're eating, maybe you're eating every 3 hours to going to eating every 5 to 6 hours, it's going to be a little rough. I used to eat every 2 hours. So I always wanted to get protein in my body so I can maintain my muscle tissue. So when I switched from eating every 2 hours to every 5 to 6 hours, I couldn't do it. I can make it like 2.5 hours and I was starving. Then I pushed myself up to 3 hours and eventually I got to 5 hours. And now I'm at 5 or 6, or I'm at about 6 to 6.5 hours that I'm not hungry in between meals. And my body has become more efficient at using the energy that I'm giving it. It's using the fat, keeping my fat levels down and keeping my risk to many of the diseases down also. So give this a little time. It took me a couple months to be able to go from eating every 2 hours to eating every 5 to 6 hours. So give it some time. Your energy levels will stay up. They'll dip down a little bit in between the time that insulin and glucagon are readjusting to get the blood sugar levels back into play into the bloodstream so that your insulin can put it back into the 75 trillion cells. You might experience a little dip of energy, but it'll rebound and go right back to where it should be with your energy levels. Okay, so instead of every 3 to 4 hours eating, go to 5 to 6 hours of eating and give your body the time that it needs to use the energy that you have stored inside you. Now, the thing about glycogen, I forgot to tell you about glycogen tanks can only hold so much stored carbohydrates. Now, the average liver can hold about 100 grams of stored carbohydrates. Now, 4 calories are inside 1 gram of carbohydrate. It has 4 calories of energy. So if you have 100 grams of stored carbohydrates in your liver, 100 times 4, the 4 calories, is 400 calories of stored energy you have in your liver alone. Now, you have much more muscle tissue than you do liver tissue. So muscle tissue can hold a lot more glycogen. So muscle tissue can hold about 4 times as much stored carbohydrates than the liver can. So if you have 400 grams of carbohydrates inside your muscle tissue, 400 times 4, the 4 calories, gives you 1,600 calories. So a combined liver glycogen and muscle glycogen, you have a combined 2,000 calories of energy just waiting to be used. That's a full day's worth of energy. So you don't need to be eating every 3 hours. You have plenty of energy. You just have to know how to tap into it and know how to use it. You need to give your body the time to be able to do that. So eating every 5 to 6 hours will be able to get into the glycogen tanks, get into the fat cells, reduce the weight, reduce your risk to the diseases. Okay? Now, if you liked what you learned here, or if you have questions, something needs to be clarified, please leave a comment at the bottom and I'll be happy to answer any question you may have, and I'll see you in the next video.